John McKinney, a 24-year-old private in the United States Army, faced a nightmare no one should survive. Luzon, May 11th, 1945, 4:47 a.m. The Philippine campaign had already claimed more than 60,000 American lives. McKinney lay in his small tent near Dingalan Bay, unaware that 100 Japanese soldiers were creeping silently through the dense jungle. The enemy had watched this position for days, counted the Americans, memorized guard rotations, and planned an assault meant to wipe out every man in Company A of the 123rd Infantry Regiment. The jungle was unnervingly quiet. McKinney's M1 Garand rested at his side. Outside, Sergeant Fukutaro Mori led the vanguard, tasked with eliminating the first Americans silently. Their orders were simple: no gunfire, just swords and bayonets. One precise strike could end a life before alarm could sound. McKinney had grown up hunting in Georgia woods, the son of a sharecropper, trained to survive when every mistake could mean hunger. By the age of 12, he could hit a squirrel at 50 yards with a .22 rifle. That instinct, born from years of hunting and survival, was about to save him. The Japanese advanced in complete darkness. Over 100 soldiers, armed with rifles, grenades, knee mortars, and swords, moved toward the American perimeter. McKinney had just returned from his long shift, manning the light machine gun. His body was tired, his mind ready to rest, but survival demanded vigilance. The first strike came within seconds. The tent flap burst open. A sword swung diagonally toward his neck. McKinney reacted instinctively, his hand grabbing the rifle not to fire, but to strike. The butt slammed under the enemy's chin with enough force to shatter bone. A second swing crushed the skull of the Japanese sergeant. Blood sprayed, screams echoed, but there was no time to pause. Outside, more footsteps advanced through the camp. The machine gun position, 30 yards from McKinney's tent, was the linchpin of the outpost's defense. 3 Americans had manned it. Now 2 were wounded, the third retreating to protect his comrade. 10 Japanese soldiers reached the emplacement before McKinney could arrive. He sprinted directly into the fray, firing his M1 Garand at point-blank range. 4 men fell. Leaping into the gun pit, he continued, rounds flying, striking enemies at distances measured in inches rather than yards. Within seconds, 10 attackers were dead. McKinney's ear was severed, blood pouring, but he kept moving, adapting instinctively. Dawn crept across the horizon. McKinney faced nearly 100 soldiers regrouping at the edge of the jungle. His M1 Garand magazine was empty. He scavenged ammunition from the bodies around him: American rounds, Japanese rifles, grenades, and prepared for the next wave. Mortar fire began. The ground shook. Dirt and shrapnel sprayed across his cover. He dropped into a shallow depression, firing from new angles, exploiting movement, forcing the enemy to adapt. McKinney was alone. Company A was scattered, fighting along other sectors of the perimeter. The Japanese adjusted tactics, sending squads individually, leapfrogging forward. He recognized the pattern immediately. He had hunted animals that used similar strategies. A pack of coyotes would surround prey from multiple angles. Now he was the prey, but he was faster, smarter, trained for survival under pressure. 31 minutes into the assault, McKinney's movements became a blur. Rifle, reload, fire, move, repeat. He engaged multiple targets simultaneously, shifting between firing positions, forcing the Japanese to hesitate. Every hesitation cost them. Every mistake became a chance for McKinney to survive. By the time the second wave approached, he had killed or wounded over 35 enemies, holding the key positions alone. The Japanese had underestimated one man, and McKinney had turned the tide of this initial attack with nothing but skill, instinct, and determination. The Philippine campaign was merciless, the enemy relentless, but John McKinney had become more than a soldier. He was a force of survival, an unpredictable threat, a hunter using the jungle and his M1 Garand as extensions of his instincts. And the battle had only just begun. The jungle seemed alive with the whispers of the dead. McKinney moved like a shadow through the undergrowth, each step calculated, each breath measured. The canopy above filtered the early morning sun, casting mottled patterns across the forest floor. The enemy was regrouping, their numbers formidable, but McKinney had already proven that skill and instinct could outweigh sheer force. His hands shook from adrenaline and blood loss, but his eyes were razor sharp. Ahead, a small stream cut through the dense foliage, providing both cover and a potential hazard. McKinney followed it silently, listening to the rustle of leaves and distant shouts. Japanese squads, some armed with mortars, others with rifles and swords, were methodically moving to encircle the American positions. He spotted a group of 3 advancing along a ridge, unaware that he had the high ground. Without hesitation, McKinney raised his M1 Garand, sighting carefully despite the chaos around him. He fired, the sharp crack echoing through the jungle. One man fell, the other 2 ducked instinctively behind trees. He reloaded quickly, then used his rifle butt to knock out the nearest enemy who dared approach. The dense foliage hid his movements, and every shadow became a potential threat he could control. Nearby, a fallen comrade's M1911 lay half buried in mud. McKinney snatched it, checking the magazine, and strapped it to his side. He now carried both the M1 Garand and the pistol, ready for any encounter at close or medium range. The Japanese were coordinating, shouting in rapid succession, using hand signals and whistles. Their tactics were disciplined, almost professional. But McKinney had hunted animals that thought in packs, and he could predict their moves. An explosion shook the ground nearby, mortar fire landing perilously close. Dirt and leaves sprayed over McKinney as he dropped into a shallow depression. Moments later, a small squad of 4 attempted to flank him from the left. He pivoted, firing in short, controlled bursts. 2 soldiers went down immediately, the others scrambled for cover. McKinney pressed forward, moving from tree to tree, using fallen logs and rocks as cover. His body ached, but instinct and survival overrode pain. Time became irrelevant. Minutes stretched into an eternity as McKinney fought continuously, scanning for enemy movement, improvising defensive positions. He grabbed grenades from fallen Japanese soldiers, understanding their explosive power better than they did. With each toss, he disrupted formations, buying himself precious seconds to reposition. Every breath, every heartbeat was measured against potential death. The jungle opened briefly into a clearing, and McKinney assessed the situation. The clearing was littered with the detritus of battle, spent shells, broken rifles, bloodied uniforms. Across the clearing, more Japanese soldiers were advancing, their intent clear. They wanted to wipe out any remaining Americans, to secure the perimeter fully. McKinney ducked behind a half-fallen tree, calculating his next move. Suddenly, a rifle cracked nearby, the bullet striking a tree mere inches from his head. McKinney returned fire, his M1 Garand's report deafening in the confined space of the clearing. He fired with precision, each shot deliberate, each movement controlled. A soldier lunged with a bayonet. McKinney pivoted, swinging the rifle butt into the attacker's jaw. The soldier dropped, and McKinney rolled behind a fallen trunk to reload. Sweat, blood, and grime covered him, yet he remained alert. Every sound, every shadow, every rustle in the underbrush could signify life or death. He remembered his training, the hunts in Georgia, the silent tracking of prey. Now the prey was himself, and yet he moved like a predator, exploiting weaknesses, predicting enemy reactions. As the sun rose higher, the Japanese continued to press, attempting to coordinate another wave. McKinney, despite exhaustion, exploited their overconfidence. He moved in bursts, sometimes appearing in one place, then vanishing into the dense foliage moments later. His M1911 cracked at close range, his M1 Garand tearing through ranks at medium distances. Within the hour, he had neutralized at least another dozen enemies, holding the American line single-handedly. Smoke and dust hung in the air, mingling with the early morning mist. The sounds of the battle, the cracks of rifles, the screams, the thuds of bodies hitting the ground, created a symphony of chaos. McKinney's mind focused only on survival and the immediate tactical situation. Each encounter reinforced his instincts. Each strike honed his precision. By midday, the Japanese began a more cautious advance, wary of the unseen force that had decimated their initial waves. McKinney used this hesitation, moving silently from tree to tree, striking where necessary and retreating before a counterattack could form. His ability to read the jungle, predict enemy tactics, and exploit terrain made him a force that no one could anticipate. Though physically battered, he remained unbroken. The jungle had become his battlefield, his hunting ground, and he moved through it with unmatched efficiency. The survivors of Company A were scattered, but McKinney's actions had bought them crucial time to regroup and fortify secondary positions. The first true sense of control in the morning came as he paused briefly on a ridge overlooking the main perimeter. Dozens of Japanese soldiers were dead or wounded, their momentum halted by a single, determined soldier. McKinney's ears rang, his body screamed for rest, but his focus remained absolute. In the chaos of the Philippine campaign, John McKinney had become more than a soldier. He was a one-man shield, a guardian of survival, a hunter in the heart of the jungle. And the battle raged on. By now, the Philippine dawn had fully broken over Luzon. John McKinney, 24-year-old private in the 123rd Infantry Regiment, had faced a near-impossible nightmare and survived. The jungle around Dingalan Bay was littered with bodies, both Japanese and American, the aftermath of an assault that had seemed unstoppable. The enemy had underestimated one man, and that miscalculation had cost them dearly. McKinney's uniform was torn, his ear still bleeding, his hands slick with blood, but he remained vigilant. Company A had begun to regroup, returning fire from scattered positions along the perimeter. The Japanese, battered by a combination of ferocious close-quarter combat and relentless rifle fire, retreated into the jungle, leaving behind equipment, wounded soldiers, and confusion. Every second of the previous hour had been a test of survival, instinct, and pure determination. McKinney had moved from tent to machine gun emplacement, from shallow depression to foxhole, always adapting to the enemy's tactics, always staying one step ahead. His M1 Garand and M1911 had been extensions of his experience, honed from years hunting in Georgia's woods. Yet the battle was not over. The Philippine campaign was merciless. More attacks could come at any hour, and McKinney knew that each wave of Japanese soldiers could be just as deadly as the first. But for now, he had done what no one expected. One private had held the line, turning a desperate night assault into a testament of individual courage and survival. Commanders would later write reports, noting the extraordinary actions of McKinney. Fellow soldiers whispered about the man who fought like a force of nature, a hunter in the jungle, blending skill, instinct, and sheer determination. The history of Luzon would remember that day, not just for the chaos and bloodshed, but for the heroism of a single American soldier. McKinney rested briefly, surveying the battlefield. The jungle held its quiet menace, but for the moment, the immediate threat had passed. He reloaded, checked his positions, and prepared for what might come next. One thing was certain: the Philippine campaign would demand everything from him, and he would give it without hesitation, for survival, for his comrades, and for the mission. And the jungle would continue to test him relentlessly until the very end.